Small farmers were traditionally the backbone of rural Irish life and its economy, and farmers were always considered as custodians of the land.
But in recent decades, many Irish people have moved away from the land and traditional farming methods. There's been an increase in farm size, and high-intensity farming is now required in order for farmers to be competitive. Modern methods of agriculture improve efficiency, but they also put enormous pressure on the same natural resources farmers rely on: water, soil and air. The current method of spreading slurry is one of the two main reasons why 60% of Ireland's groundwater is polluted. Michael Doran is an enterprising and progressive Wexford farmer trying to meet the environmental challenges facing Irish farmers today.
Duncan.
How are you, Michael? Good to see you.
You're very welcome.
So this is your farm?
This is my farm here,
Very
yeah.
good.
In here we have some beef animals, the beef heifers. They're about 20 months of age. We have 80 cows. They produce beef calves on the farm. All their progeny is brought to beef and they're slaughtered about 2 years of age. They're on a ration here of silage and cereals mixed together and fed out to them.
And then they're on the slat, in a slatted shed here?
Yeah, they're on slats. They lie on the slats. The animals get very used to it.
But all of their waste goes down here?
It's a concrete floor with grooves in it, where the slurry actually goes down through it. It's collected in a tank underneath. And because of the weather conditions, we have to bring them indoors for the winter months. And this is a great facility for collecting the slurry. There's no rainwater getting in because of the roof. It's going straight down into the tank underneath, which is about 450,000 litres. The access is here to the tank. It's an agitation point to mix it all back up again, and then it'll be ready to spread out on the land.
And do you get much time in the spring to do it before the actual grass starts to grow?
You have to get out when there's very little grass on the field, because you don't want to contaminate the grass.
I suppose we should close these for safety.
Yeah, safety. It's 8 foot deep, so we don't want anyone falling in.
Yeah. Obviously, this makes it difficult for farmers. They've got a small window of opportunity in the spring. They're very busy at that time. Yeah. And if they miss that opportunity, they really have to wait until the summer.
Yeah.
After the silage is cut.
Yeah. That would be the problem.
And are there solutions to that?
I suppose one solution would be the trailing shoe, which is a new concept.
Scientists at Teagasc nearby are conducting research into this new slurry spreading technology.
Stan, we're looking at two ways to spread slurry here.
That's right. What we've done here on the right-hand side is that we've applied slurry with a conventional machine that's used on Irish farms at the moment called a splash plate. And on this side, on the left, we're comparing that with a newer machine called the trailing shoe, which is now available for spreading slurry. If you look at the splash plate, the way that spreads is it applies an even film of slurry across the entire spreading area of the machine. Whereas now the trailing shoe is a system that applies the slurry into neat lines across the grass canopy. So it means that the slurry now is confined to these bands, and this area here doesn't come in contamination with slurry at all.
Right, so does this mean now that you can spread slurry when the grass is growing?
That's right. One of the big limitations with the splash plate is that you need very low grass covers, or else you contaminate the grass and it affects the animals when they eat the grass afterwards. The requirement for nutrients is in the spring, so if we can spread the slurry in the spring rather than the summer, it means that we're going to need less fertiliser.
Although investing in this technology costs farmers more, the trailing shoe may be the future to slurry spreading in Ireland. And this type of application will help to reduce surface runoff of slurry from fields into our waterways.
It's all about protecting this water resource. Unfortunately, most of the damage to water quality in Ireland is from agricultural sources. So, and what happens here?
The cows come into the collecting yard and they're waiting to be milked. And from that, they go into the milking parlour. They're milked inside, and on their way in, they're doing their business on the collecting yard. Soil water is being generated.
Right, so they excrete here, basically.
Exactly.
So how much water is used here in this area?
So,
washing?
Okay, approximately 45 litres is generated by every cow that comes into the yard.
On average?
On average. The water here is generally divided up into the collecting yard water, And then inside, the more hygienic side of things, that uses only mains water inside.
That's for the actual cleaning of the udders and machinery.
Like that, yeah.
But then there's probably the cleaning down of the parlour itself.
That's all additional water to the water generated on the collecting yards.
Right. So really all that wastewater from both of those areas, they're the ones that could be recycled.
Absolutely, yeah. They all accumulate together and are stored into one area, and then that water is pumped to the remediation unit that we're using at the moment. Bacteria that we use then to eat away the soiled water is actually grown on this biofilm here.
Just like a medium here.
It is, yeah. This is the water now that we've collected from the collecting yard.
So this is really polluted water.
That's the polluted water, yeah. And then this is the one we aim to achieve through our research.
Right, so this is a matter of amount of time spent in this wastewater treatment plant. You can go from this quality to this quality.
To the cleaner water,
and presumably go totally clear if you leave it in long enough.
Well, not totally clear. It'll always be a grey water.
Right.
So the water then we use here will be through a power hose back onto the collecting yard, and we'll wash down the yards twice daily.
So this is going to save an awful lot of fresh, clean water,
it will,
drinking water.
It'll save the farmer taking water from the mains, and instead they can use this water over and over again to recycle and wash the yards.
Right. With water charges coming for homes, for businesses, for agriculture, will this save farmers money?
Yeah, in the long term, because of that saving on the mains water, they won't have to then go ahead and pay for the water, so they'll be saving and saving.
I got married last year and we divided the house.
Will you have a cup of tea?
I love a cup of tea.
You must be freezing after being outside.
Well, after all that and the rain and the slurry and everything, I'll tell you, this is going to go down well. So, but it must be difficult though for Farmer Ciara. You've an awful lot of pressures now today.
Yeah, it is difficult because there's been a lot of changes brought in the past year, and farmers are finding it difficult to adapt to it. There's a lot of rules and regulations and some red tape.
Especially since we joined the EU.
Most farmers are relying on the single farm payment as their main means of income.
And of course, on top of all of that now, you've got the Nitrates Directive and you've got the Water Framework Directive. Yeah. What sort of challenges do they give you?
Well, these will be major challenges because even on the farm here, we have to invest in extra slurry storage facilities on the farm. It will roughly cost about 50,000 by the time it's finished, and that's just to meet the requirements. Costs have rose quite substantially. As energy has rose, as the other inputs, the major inputs, the fertiliser, grain prices on the farm, labour even. We're in a high cost society here, and unless our food prices rise pro rata, you know, margins are being squeezed on farms the whole time, and we need to see a price rise now at this stage to ensure the viability of the family farm structure that we have here in Ireland. This is my mother, Duncan.
Hi. Hello.
Who we have to thank for the apple tart.
All the time.
This is Jimmy.
Hi Jimmy, how are you? You're a farmer, right? So here's to the future of farming in Ireland.
Please God.
Yeah, hopefully.
We live in a consumer culture where everything is disposable, and there's always something new and improved on offer. From the latest gadget coming on the market, or designer coffee. We've also come to rely on an ever-increasing amount of electrical appliances in our day-to-day lives. But what happens to these goods when they're worn out? Or simply worn out their welcome? Tania's going to find out.
Window shopping is one of my favourite pastimes on a day off. And since I need to buy a new toaster, I have a great excuse.
Well, you can see our selection here. If you want to choose one and you have an old one with you, or even if you haven't got it with you, we can take it back free of charge and recycle it for you.
And can I ask you, what's
The
this
50
extra
cents
charge for?
PRF, Producer Recycling Fund. Cost of the toaster is $30.49. It includes this fund, so you're not paying anything extra.
And it's great to see this price coming down. Hi, I brought back my toaster for recycling.
That's right, yes. If you just pop it into the wee bin there.
Okay, bye.
We'll do the rest.
Okay. The WE scheme stands for Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment, and I found out I can also drop my old toaster here at the local Civic Amenity Centre for recycling. where I met up with Leo Donovan.
The scheme works very simply. The public have the opportunity to bring back the waste material to civic community sites like this one here. Also to the retailers, if they're buying a like-for-like product. So if they're buying a toaster, they can bring back their existing old toaster. Or if they're getting a large appliance delivered out to their house, provided they have that appliance ready for collection, the delivery guy will take back that appliance. So that's the three ways that the public can bring back the material to these collection points. It's at that point that We Ireland come in and we will collect from these points. So once you go to the gate of a civic community site, let them know that you've got electronic waste with you and that you can come in here free of charge, and it's a free service for you once you arrive on the CA site.
How were people disposing of their waste before the recycling scheme came into place?
Before the recycling scheme, a lot of people would have been putting their wee items into the black bin and it would have been sent to landfill, or they may have been disposing of it illegally.
What are the problems associated with electrical goods ending up in landfill?
Well, the main problem is the hazardous waste content of a lot of the electrical goods would damage the environment over time.
And is there still a problem with illegal dumping?
I do know that there is still a problem with illegal dumping of wee in more rural counties and areas, yes.
Many white goods contain toxic chemicals such as CFC gases that contaminate our air, or heavy metals that corrode and leach to groundwater and have adverse effects on our soil, wildlife and local ecosystems. Other small electrical appliances, if not properly disposed of, impact on the environment surrounding managed landfill sites. Batteries are particularly hazardous and should be separated. Currently, there are 5,000 tonnes unaccounted for each year. There is, however, a new batteries directive coming in next year to address this problem, and the WE recycling scheme is already underway to deal with these issues.
The EU Commission recognised that the electronic waste was the fastest growing waste stream in Europe, and they implemented a directive which every member state has to recycle their electronic waste. Now, electronic waste is everything with a battery or a plug.
All of this electronic waste is being taken to the treatment centre. This is where my old toaster ends up once I've dropped it at the Civic Amenity Centre site or left it at the retailers. Liam O'Shea is giving me a tour.
Okay, Tania, here in Teagasc we recycle white goods, we recycle CRT, which is cathode ray tube, televisions and monitors from computers. We recycle small household appliances, which are the likes of irons, toasters, other small household appliances. We also recycle larger materials in a shredder that's part of a pre-process before sending it to our main shredding machinery. We have a separation section that separates all the plastics, the metals, and the glass and other impurities from the materials coming in. And then we have a final section, our module 4, where we further grind our materials to very small granules, and we can further separate the plastics from metals to get the optimum value from the materials that are recovered in the plant.
The EU set a collection target of 4 kilo of electrical waste per head of population per annum. Last year, the WE scheme collected nearly 8 kilo per head in Ireland. As electrical goods are now free to recycle, there's no longer an economic incentive to illegally dump these goods.
We recover almost 95% of the material that comes in our gate. We recover glass from the CRTs and televisions. That glass is later delivered to the manufacturers of these monitors and televisions, like the likes of Samsung and Hitachi. We also recover plastic and metals. The metals would be a large fraction that we recover in this plant, mainly coming from IT equipment and as well other small WE as well, like your toaster.
However, a lot of our small electrical goods are not being recycled, such as CFL bulbs, where 4/5 or over 2,000 tonnes were unaccounted for last year. There is a particular problem as these bulbs contain mercury and toxic gases that need to be delivered unbroken and treated at authorised recycling centres. It was finally time to say goodbye to my toaster.
We now recycle about half of what goes on the market every year, and we need to keep those figures rising. But we also need to remember that it still takes energy to recycle, and that too comes with an environmental cost. Looking after, repairing, and reusing what we have should remain our biggest priority.
Have you ever counted how many light bulbs you use in your home at any given time? Choosing the right lighting technology is crucial. Australia has banned filament bulbs for good reason. Use energy-efficient CFL and LED bulbs. They may cost more, but last up to 10 times longer and use only 1/5 of the energy. This will help you save money on your electricity bills and reduce your CO2 emissions.
There's so little we know about our biodiversity and natural resources, particularly our wetlands, and if we want to conserve them, it's important that we learn more about them.
Well, ECA is funding an awful lot of research across the breadth of environmental issues. So we would have already major projects established in biodiversity, in air quality, water quality, and indeed in socio-economic studies, and of course into the area of climate change. So this project sort of overarches all of these areas and looks at, as I said, a very important land type for us, the Bogland and Peatland areas.
Ireland is home to a large proportion of Europe's peatlands, yet many people here think of bogs as a form of wasteland, and therefore of little importance.
Heather, sedges, bog rosemary and
bog cotton. So Florence, this now is a blanket bog, an upland bog, is it?
Yes, so it's one of the 3 types of peatlands we have in Ireland, rice bogs, blanket bogs and fens. Bogs are made of this sphagnum, bog mosses basically, and this is a building block of the bog. This is typical of a bog because it grows only in a wet and acidic environment. Here you've got a hummock, which is a typical feature in a bog, which is this raised area of sphagnum, and there are many species of sphagnum. Without that, the bog will dry and the bog will not grow, and it won't sequester the carbon. The principal function of bog is to store carbon.
So these have taken how long to grow, to build a bog like this on this mountain?
Bog formation started at the end of the last ice age, 10,000 years ago, and they're still growing. Bogs have been used since prehistoric times in Ireland, but recently, especially in the middle of the 20th century, the traditional turf cutting has increased, and it's turned into commercial extraction, either for fuel or for horticulture. But what we have also is bogs have been used for forestry and for agriculture and grazing by sheep, and that has degraded a lot of the blanket bogs.
So what's special about our boglands?
Well, peatlands are one of the most fascinating natural ecosystems in the world, and that's because they have key values such as biodiversity conservation. You know, there's rare plants and animals living on the bogs. They're also very important to regulate climate change, but overall they provide mankind with many services, like water storage. They are really unique, and that's why we need to protect them.
Ireland has a lot of boglands. Why is that?
Well, Ireland has 17% of its land covered with peatlands, and this is because of its climate. Most of the bogs have been modified by man, but the last 50 years or so, bogs have been extensively used in Ireland. So they've been degraded and they don't function as well because they're drier. Ireland possesses 8% of the world's blanket bogs. Although they're everywhere here in the Slieve Bloom, they're actually unique in the world, and that's why it's important to protect them.
So is this a raised bog?
Yes, Duncan, this is Clara bog.
They're really now much deeper, are they, these raised bogs?
They are. They are much deeper, up to 10 metre deep.
Is this like a core reading, is it?
Yes, you just push it in, down a bit.
It's around, right?
Out.
Okay.
This is 1 metre, and then by slicing it like so,
you get a cross section.
You get a cross section, and you can look at the colours of the peat here.
So, is this part now of your Bogland research project?
It is. This is part of the EPA-funded Bogland project, and one of the objectives is actually to map and measure all the bogs and the density of the peat, so that we can measure how much carbon there is in Irish bogs. And to answer the question, how should we manage our peatlands? My husband, Dr. David Wilson, is actually working also on the project and is a carbon expert.
Hey Duncan, how are things?
How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad.
I'll let you chat.
Thank you.
Thanks Florence. David, how much carbon is stored in peat?
In a peatland like this, it's around 2,000 tonnes of carbon per hectare. So it's an enormous store of carbon.
Is that because of the depth of the...
The depth, and because of over the 10,000 years, it's accumulated a lot of carbon. And basically the way it does this is that the carbon is taken in by the vegetation. Because of the high water table, very little is released out again. So you get a build-up of carbon over the years.
So it's stored there like a carbon sink?
It is a carbon sink, and is one of the biggest carbon sinks in the world. This has shaped the global climate the way it is, and it helps maintain the climate in the condition it is at the moment.
How much does turf contribute to our total energy consumption in Ireland?
It's around 5–6% of the total energy needs. That's supplemented by oil and gas, of course.
And we've been extracting this for a long time. Historically, how much damage have we done so far?
There is some research that says that it's up to 46% of our peatlands have been damaged by domestic cutting alone. So it's quite a sizable area, and if you contribute the areas from industrial cutting as well, it's quite a large amount of Irish peatlands have been damaged, and maybe only around 20% are in a relatively intact state today.
So what happens in the industrial bogs?
It's quite an extreme scenario in terms of the scale involved. Typically the vegetation is completely removed so that there's no carbon going into the system at all. And secondly, these deep drainage ditches now have lowered the water table to such an extent that the zone above the water table is now a persistent source of carbon dioxide.
How much damage are we doing in terms of the CO2 emissions from this?
We're releasing a lot of CO2 emissions, there's no doubt about that. If you contrast that with the peatland, if it remained untouched, where it is taking in a small amount of carbon dioxide every year, we've now gone the full spectrum now, where we're releasing a lot of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere through the harvesting of the peat, but also through the combustion of the peat.
So, should we stop burning peat in Ireland?
From a scientific point of view, burning of peat is not sustainable and is only contributing to the continued global warming and climate change.
Boglands make a valuable contribution to our environment, but we're turning a positive into a negative, potentially releasing billions of tonnes of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and all of this subsidised on our electricity bill. Our attitudes have to change. As part of the Boglands project, Marcus Collier is conducting research into how people see peatlands.
A few years doing this type of work.
Have you talked to people in the area about peat harvesting?
Yes, Duncan, I've been spending the last 2 years talking to people in fairly remote parts of the country, the Midlands of the country, on how they see peatlands and what they think about the future of peatlands if and when harvesting is finished. Nearly 1,000 people are employed directly, and then quite a few others in electricity generation and distribution and so on. So there will be a knock-on effect.
What's the solution to this?
Well, some of the solutions would be, for example, to look at peat from another point of view. Other countries where they have restored peatland systems, like the blanket bogs in Scotland, they have turned people who are once damaging the peatlands in overgrazing into people who are now conserving the peatlands for tourism. So there is an income to be made in an alternative and sustainable industry instead of a destructive industry.
In our next programme, we'll be exploring our forest's unique ecosystems. We'll be looking at why we Irish are the biggest consumers in Europe. And we look at the pleasures and the pressures on our Midland waterways.